Most people believe that everything that can be invented has already been invented, and manufacturers are merely designing products that'll sell well according to the market conditions. And that's not a lie. The aviation industry is a huge, complex, and expensive industry. The cost of air is high, and no one is in a hurry to take risks. The hesitation to take risks can sometimes be devastatingly expensive, and our today's legend is a victim of hesitation. To better understand why Mooney aircraft failed, let's understand the last models of the M20, the M20U Aviation Ultra, and the M20V Acclaim Ultra. But for the sake of simplicity, we'll talk more about the Acclaim. When the Mooney M20V Acclaim Ultra came to the market, it delivered something pilots had long wished for: a second door. Mooney didn't just add another door, they made both doors wider, making entries and exits easier. The panel and cabin have been updated. The four-seat interior's updated ergonomic design, which has hand-stitched Italian leather seats, abundant cup holders, and power outlets, is inspired by luxury automobiles. There are two color combinations available for the accentuated leather seats: black and saddle brown and black and light gray. The switchology on the new panel for the Acclaim Ultra has been restructured, and rockers have replaced toggles. The panel is well organized, but some switches are hidden by the yoke due to its small size. The airplane has the most modern, user-friendly Garmin G1000 NXI avionics, as well as synthetic vision. The system has faster processing for a quicker startup and almost instant graphics refreshing. Garmin appears to have simplified the operational logic, and the displays are brighter and clearer. The Garmin keypad, which is now placed at the bottom of the panel, can be used to control the G1000 avionics. The option to write in fixes and frequencies rather than turning the G1000's knobs is a huge improvement, even though it is not quite in the ideal place for the armrest position. The GFC 700 autopilot and the G1000 NXI are fully connected, and a vertical control panel is positioned in the middle of the two displays. The GFC 700 currently has a reputation as the best new autopilot in general aviation, and it's deserved. It allows for flexible aircraft control, and the ride is silky smooth. The Acclaim Ultra is well equipped that there aren't many extra options to choose from. For $16,720, you can add the GTS 800 active traffic system, but most pilots don't go for it because ADS-B traffic is as good as it gets. Because of the weight limit, you can get either ice protection or air conditioning, not both. The air conditioning is a $29,000 option with a weight penalty of 66 pounds or 30 kilograms. TKS weighs 95 pounds or 43 kilograms fully charged, and it adds $65,000 to the invoice. Most pilots always ditch the air conditioning because they can simply pop the door open during taxi. Speaking of the new second door, adding a second door to a 50-year-old design is no easy feat. Mooney made them bigger and better. The doors have new latching mechanisms and tasty brushed aluminum handles. This means that access to the rear seats is much easier. In addition to that, having a door on the left side of the fuselage allows the pilot to step right into the left seat without having to squeeze through the entire cabin. Visibility over the glare shield is noticeably better than in the earlier Ovations and the Bravo because Mooney has lowered the height of the panel by more than 2 inches, something that's especially welcome when taxiing at night. The higher glare shields were an undesirable carryover from the Porsche Mooney days that has finally been corrected. On top of that, they also added a new composite skin to enclose the cabin's protective chromoly steel roll cage. Traditionally all metal, the airplane now has a composite canopy that enhances the aerodynamic flow and reduces cabin noise. Also, the windshield and windows are slotted into the composite from the outside, a process that is much faster and will make replacements a breeze compared with the previous design. The tail cone and wings remained metal, and the cowling was already made of composites. The airplane sports dozens of less obvious improvements, including a carbon fiber cowl, gear doors and wingtips, and drag performance including a gap seal for the flaps. Speaking of performance, the aircraft is powered by a 280 horsepower Continental TSIO 550G with 3-bladed Hartzell propellers in front. It achieves a maximum climb rate of 1,375 feet, a ceiling of 25,000 feet or 7,620 meters, and a maximum speed of 242 knots. At an economy cruise speed of 175 knots, the maximum range is 1,275 nautical miles, with a fuel burn of roughly 20 gallons per hour. Mooney's turbocharged models have never been payload workhorses, and neither is the Acclaim Ultra. Despite the serious innovations the Acclaim and the Acclaim Ultra got, they couldn't save Mooney from the economic nosedive course. There are reasons why Mooney sold slowly this time around, and it wasn't the machines. The company greatly improved the product. They added space, a pilot side door, made the windows bigger and the avionics sweeter, all by incorporating a composite forward fuselage shell. The transformation was impressive. Unfortunately, it failed to impress potential customers enough to keep the program alive. The new Ultras, the brand name for the new improved M20s, sold slowly, which is sad because they did everything aeronautical at a great rate of speed. The Acclaim Ultra is the fastest production piston single ever, and by a good margin too. Why some people turn up their noses at Al Mooney's old school design is a mystery to me. 240 knots is wicked fast, and even if corrected for actual flying conditions, because, let's face it, who flies a single at 25,000 feet? You're still looking at a 220-knot airplane in the mid-teens at less than 20 gallons per hour. The M20's main competition, if you can even call the Mooney competition, is the Cirrus SR-22 and the Cessna TTX, which are slower, more expensive, and for some people, less sexy than Mooney's slick little retractable gear speedster. But the Cirrus SR-22 outsold Mooney's by a factor of around 50 to 1. Why? In part, it's because Cirrus has a stable business profile. Its marketing is super slick, its technology is top-notch, and it has the parachute which a lot of pilots and not just their spouses are asking for these days. Did the M20, which is time-consuming to build, ever really have a chance against the SR-22? Of course it didn't. Nothing exists in a vacuum, which is to say that Mooney's success, at least some of it, will come from siphoning sales from Cirrus and perhaps Cessna's TTX. How would the three look to a potential buyer comparing them? First, payload. For the sake of not kinda comparing apples to oranges, let's use the Aviation Ultra for this comparison instead of the Acclaim because of the payload difference. The Aviation Ultra held a useful load of 10,050 pounds on a gross weight of 3,368 pounds. Standard fuel is 100 gallons, so with full tanks, that leaves 450 pounds for people and stuff. The Ultra, then, is a 2-person airplane with generous baggage, or a 3-person ride if down-fueled by about 20 gallons. The SR-22, the direct competitor, has a useful load of about 1,200 pounds on a gross of 3,600 pounds, so it's not really a seats-full, tanks-full airplane, but it can get there with little down-fueling. This, in part, may account for why Cirrus dominates the single-engine, high-performance market and why sales of the SR-22 and turbocharged SR-22T are almost evenly split. Even though surveys consistently find that most piston GA trips carry just 1 or 2 people, buyers apparently want the option of back seats that they can really use. Except, some would rather go further and faster with the rear seats full of stuff or nothing at all. These are the probable Mooney buyers. Head-to-head against the SR-22, the Mooney flies further, is faster, and burns less gas than the Cirrus. For all-out range on full tanks, with a 45-minute reserve, the Aviation Ultra can manage 1,154 still-air miles against the Cirrus's 872 miles, a range delta of 32%. It'll get there faster, too. Non-turbocharged aircraft typically reach their cruise stride at 8,000 to 10,000 feet. Climbing above that without a turbocharger dings cruise speed because of diminishing engine power. Still, the Ultra is a solid 190-knot airplane at these altitudes using best power throttle settings. Dial it back to best economy, and the speed is still 180 knots. The SR-22 is 8 to 10 knots slower. It's also a little thirstier. At 8,000 feet and 75% power, the SR-22 will cruise at 180 knots and 17.8 gallons. The Mooney will do 190 knots at 15.9 gallons per hour. Thus, is the payoff a lighter, smaller airframe with landing gear that folds up. But was the niche attractive enough to let the program survive the long term? Hard to say. Would sales of 50 planes a year have been enough? Maybe not. It's expensive to build airplanes, and much of that expense is beyond Mooney's control. Mooney buys a lot of components from vendors, and there are hundreds of items on every Mooney. Everything from engines and props to nuts and bolts is sold by those vendors so they can make a profit. They're not giving engines away, and the things the airframer needs to build take hundreds of employees and extremely expensive infrastructure and tooling. Building airplanes is not for the faint of heart or checkbook. So, could Mooney have succeeded? Maybe, but it would have had to have exceeded expectations by a lot. The part of the problem that is never talked about is that Mooney was and is still owned by a Chinese company. Part of the promise of Chinese ownership was that a burgeoning Chinese aviation sector would drive sales of hundreds upon hundreds of new Moonies. The company even designed a cute little two-seater, the Model M10, which kind of resembled the old Mooney M10 Cadet, which was an outgrowth of the Ercoupe design. It never got built or flown, and the thousands of sales of that emerging model never materialized. The sprawling Mooney International Corps factory in Kerrville, Texas, where more than 11,000 single-engine airplanes have been produced since 1953, has slipped back into hibernation. When or if it will ever re-emerge, no one really knows. A previous skeleton crew kept the company alive, on paper at least, from 2008 until 2013. The latest Mooney closure isn't surprising, given the company's weak sales record. The company delivered just 14 airplanes in 2018, according to the General Aviation Manufacturers Association, well below the company's stated annual target of at least 25. The Chinese owners invested heavily in modernizing production with new equipment and materials, and they made thoughtful improvements to its flagship M20 Ovation and Acclaim Ultra models with a left side door and composite cabin. And even though the M20s are faster and have nearly identical engines and avionics to the market-leading Cirrus SR-22s, Moonies don't have airframe parachutes, and for that reason alone, Cirrus outsold them. An airframe parachute would have boosted new aircraft sales, but Mooney was not willing to pursue FAA certification for a parachute. Instead, they focused on the emerging Asian market and planned to produce airplanes in China. But that market never materialized. Mooney has a loyal following among owners who prize speed, handling qualities, range, and value, and the existing fleet of used Mooney aircraft was its most serious competition. For example, a brand new Acclaim had a retail price of $800,000, but 10-year-old models with nearly identical performance are available for 1/3 or even 1/4 of that amount. Value-conscious Mooney pilots were reluctant to pay such a high premium for new airplanes when the same amount gets a Cirrus, which gets them a parachute peace of mind. Mooney has economically deteriorated so many times only to be revived by optimistic new owners as to defy any realistic laws of business. The plane is fundamentally a great design. It also has a good base to form a core parts and support business. Mooney was offering refurb programs for old models, and that might still be an expansion option. As for coming back, the Cirrus SR22 dominates the market not only because it's a good design, but because they have a skilled and aggressive sales force and post-sale customer care that owners rave about. To remain a player, Mooney may have to at least match that. If you like our videos, please smash the like and subscribe button. You can also join us by clicking on the link next to the subscribe button. Thanks for watching.